Hello, everybody. I'm Derek Arden. Welcome to Monday Night Live. Tonight we've got an informal session before we finish the summer session with two fantastic speakers over the next 2 weeks. So I want to talk to you about mastermind groups because I've been involved in 5 or 6 mastermind groups, and I first learnt about mastermind groups when I studied at Marco Island University in Florida for the National Speakers Association. I think Kate might have been there, but I don't know whether she was or not. I wasn't very impressed with the first mastermind group I went to because some of the people only had their own agendas, so it wasn't very helpful. And the whole point of a mastermind group is about having the right people there and sharing. And I'm going to talking about sharing. I'm now going to share my screen. And share just a few slides with you as I introduce you to mastermind groups, and then we'll have a debate about the benefits of mastermind groups, etc. So can everybody see my screen? Can someone give Alex, I've got you in the thing, give me the thumbs up if you can see it. That's great. Okay, so what about the style of mastermind groups? Mastermind groups are for the benefit of the participants, and there's formal mastermind groups and informal ones. I prefer the informal ones because the formal ones are generally paid for. But the history of mastermind groups, according to Google, and I'm sure Socrates and Plato ran mastermind groups in Greece, and even people before that, showed on Google that King Arthur was the first person recorded to run a round table where all his knights were equal and everybody shared their opinions. And what's quite interesting is they were around a round table. For those of you that negotiate know that's one of my top tips on negotiating. Get round a round table rather than across a rectangular one, because people will share a lot more and a lot quicker. Number 2 was Ben Franklin in 1709, and then Napoleon Hill was one of the first authors of motivational speaking, ideas, etc. in 1923, and he was commissioned by the president of the USA to set up a mastermind group because he was fed up with being told what to do by advisors. He wanted some of the best people in the US to sit around the table with him. Mastermind groups are not rocket science. They're pretty simple, but there are some structures and some leadership that's required. Who do you invite? I've talked about this with several people, and John Baker and I had a chat about it about half an hour ago. You invite smart people, smart, respectable people who are nice and giving. They're prepared to share their ideas and they're up for helping others. If you get people outside of that, you can have difficulty. My experience in Florida, I was introduced to mastermind groups, but I thought, no, this is not for me. Then I set one up in London, which worked well. And in fact, Kate Atkin was in the first one I ever set up. It was in the Farmers Club, and Kate booked it. Just remember that, Kate. And then one for the Speaking Association, which was a little bit more difficult because people had to travel from all over the UK, and that does make it more difficult. And one in Guildford, where we have a breakfast once a month, which is much easier because people don't have distances to travel. I found you tend to need to organize it yourself. If you want a mastermind group and people aren't paying, and they're not in one of those boxes where people are paying for leadership advice, and it's generally people who work for themselves, then set it up yourself and pick the right people. They can get too chummy. It does need leadership and firm control. Networking groups can become mastermind groups or a combination of both. Networking groups, once people have networked, can tend to go into being a mastermind group. Formal mastermind groups, according to Google, and there's a big debate about this. I don't know why my slides won't go backwards. They've gone backwards. BNI claims to be the biggest mastermind group in the world. I'm not sure that that's the role of BNI. Vistage came second, according to Google. I'm not even sure about that. And then there's individual ones for a payment, and people run I know Alex runs a leadership group, and 40% of the time he tells me that they mastermind and share ideas. Or you can have your own ones with an agenda and accountability. I don't buy accountability, because if you're a leader, if you're a smart person, why do you need to be accountable to other people in the group for what you're going to do? As far as I'm concerned, you're either going to do it or you're not going to do it, and you're going to be motivated to do it. But there is a social proof of doing that, and some people like to be accountable to other people. Or you can have an informal one like Monday Night Live. I hadn't even thought about Monday Night Live being a mastermind group until Alex mentioned it to me about 2 months ago. Or a top masterclass that Graham and I have been running over the last 4 years, where we get some fantastic speakers in and we get groups of motivated people. Or you can just organise a dinner and just bring in a bit of formality to it, where you ask people to share one thing that they've learned over the last 6 months that might be useful to anybody else. Just go around the room asking people to come up with one item that they've learned or relearned recently that could be helpful to others. John Baker and David Skinner, I'd just like to bring you in quickly, if you could unmute yourselves and just tell us about your experiences of that. John, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, loud and clear. I think a couple of interesting things I was thinking while you were saying all of that, Derek, and I agree with it all. Although I have to say, I do find accountability can be useful. Normally, however, it's not because somebody says to me, "I'm holding you accountable." The very fact that I know I'm speaking to these guys next week reminds me to do what I said I was going to do. That in itself is accountability. But you made a really important point about people that you get on with, that you respect, and I think that's incredibly important. But there's two things I would add to it. We've all sat in a group of people where one person has got, whether you call it a big ego or just doesn't shut up, and they just want to issue advice all the time. Well, I don't want to be in a group with somebody like that, because I want to be in a group with somebody that really listens to what I'm saying so they can add to it. So I think that's important. And that leads me on to the other point, which I'd add, which is about having somebody that is prepared to challenge you. So the fact that people are just nice to you doesn't really help. But you do need occasionally, not all the time, but you do need to have some good challenges from time to time. And as I say, I've done formal ones where I've been paid to run them. I've had formal ones where I've been a member of, informal groups, all sorts of groups. But both of the key things that come back time and time again are the people in the group. I think the other thing for me that's interesting is the time. I think people go, "Oh, well, I joined this group and it didn't do anything miraculous," but they'd only ever met once or twice. It takes time before you start to really trust each other. And that might be 2, 3, 4 months before you're going to get any results. And then maybe a year, maybe 2 years, that's when the chummy bit comes in. So I think you've got to be prepared to wait until it gets good. And also, as a group, be prepared to cut it when you get to the chummy stage, or adapt it. So yeah. I'm going to shut up.
Thanks, John. I've been in 1 or 2 mastermind groups where I just dropped out after the first session because of what you were saying. Alex, you got your hand up. We've got about a minute left, and then I'll go to David.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back. Well, what's actually the purpose of mastermind groups, which is a substantive issue, I think. I think the benefit of the mastermind group is the diversity. Really good mastermind groups is a diversity of opinion. You're going to have people talking about their experience, and it could be completely different to your own experience. It could be in other industries. It could be, in I don't know, just a completely different experience, which you would not get even in the same company. Because you start to have this group think, and everybody starts to think the same. Don't get, as John said, you don't get challenged. Diversity. Yeah. I was thinking, it's not a good group. I would suggest to you is if you don't have a broad range of diverse people and opinions in there.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Alex, I have tried to set up one in 1 or 2 companies I've worked for, and they haven't worked. And I think it's exactly for the reason that you mentioned. They have this group think. In fact, I suggested it to 1 or 2 people in the NHS, accountants that I was working with, because they needed help. and I suggested they set it up, but it didn't work. And just bringing the person who asks all the difficult questions in, David Skinner, if you're there just before we finish, David, we've sat in on 1 or 2 mastermind groups of such, haven't we?
Yep. The ones in Guildford we hold, I find quite useful. I think Alex's point about having a shared purpose is important. And for us, I think it's around we all recognise the value of mutual support around things which are on our minds. And they might be things we want to learn, things we're up to at the moment, or whatever it is. And I think so. The first thing you need to do is have people sharing that purpose. Could you have it in a company? I don't see why you couldn't, but you might need to establish that purpose quite clearly to take away the agendas. And I think the second thing you need to establish, which is important, is it's a psychologically safe environment. Some of you may have heard me talking about that before. But I don't think you can have that sort of mutual support without the honesty and trust and safety that comes with actually maybe talking about something you might not normally talk about outside that context. And I think the leadership, one of the core aspects of the leadership of a mastermind group is to maintain and police that non-judgmental, safe environment, because that's where the value comes out. When we're talking in Guildford Group, the interesting things are where somebody talks about something they're a bit uneasy about or insecure about or not confident about or struggling with, that they probably wouldn't be a conversation they'd have with their clients or with their colleagues. And so for me, that's how it works. I can see that for some, it could work with formal accountability if that's what everyone's signing up to. But I think everybody needs to sign up to what the purpose is and how we're going to do it. And if it's in a safe environment, it'll work.
Brilliant. Thanks, David. Join us on a Monday night for leadership tips, negotiation tips. That's the end of the tips on the mastermind group. But what I'd say to you is set one up. Take the lead, just do it. And if it works, fantastic. And if it doesn't work, so what? Move on to do something else. Because if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. My name's Derek Arden. Thanks for joining us.